All right, everybody, we are back again. Dynasty Mirror Search for Uhuru. I got brother Abuah on with us again. This I know it's night where you're at, but it's evening. I guess we're here in Atlanta, Georgia. But tonight or this evening's topic is Africans come to Europe or the West. We'll say the West as well to work hard. Meanwhile, Europeans go to Africa to exploit.
Yeah.
Now, I would say this: the West has benefited more off of African ingenuity than Africa has benefited from European ingenuity. In fact, Africa has lost more in regards to the relationship with Europe, and Europe in the West has gained more from African ingenuity. Would that be safe to say? Can we agree on that, or am I missing something?
We could easily agree on that. I think without question, the it's definitely Europe in particular, Europe and the United States have definitely benefited the most from Africa than the other way around. I mean, you only have to go back to, if you look at the history of Africa, Eurasians in general, so Europe and Asia, Europeans and Asians, because it's really just one landmass, it's one group of people. They have always been interested in the pleasures and treasures of Africa, the information. Right. You go back to ancient Kemet. I mean, there's an old saying that if I had a book of 1,000 pages, I wouldn't be able to write down the list of all the Greek scholars who tried and who wanted to go to study in Egypt or ancient Kemet.
Right.
So all the way back then, the Hyksos period, the Shepherd Kings, and all the other different groups, Romans, Greeks, and the many other groups, the Arabs during the Hijra, people have always been trying to come into Africa either to benefit from our intelligence or to benefit from our mineral wealth.
Right.
This is a thing. Nothing has changed. It's business as usual. I mean, without a question, Europe wouldn't be where it's at if they didn't have the information that Africans had been cultivating for millennia. So, I mean, without I cannot disagree with you. And by the way, let me say thank you again for having me on your show.
Oh man, brother, anytime you have an open invite.
Thank you.
Whenever you heard what's going on in Namibia, I don't know, John B, what's going on in Namibia. I know they're having land. I know they might have something similar to South Africa where they'll have land reform, but I don't know if something else is new. Just put it in the chat room if something is new. Now, would you blame Africans for allowing Europe to exploit them?
I mean, the only thing Africans have ever been guilty of is being the first people on the planet and being born on a continent that the creator decided to make the center of the world, the richest place in the world. That's the only crime we're guilty of. I mean, if you understand, if you look, there's a book by, is it Michael Bradley? I forget his name. It's The Iceman Inheritance, where it talks about the Africans that went into the Caucasus Mountains, got stuck, 10,000-year ice age, eventually lose their melanin and become white people. Now, if you understand the psychology of that white man, he's honestly in a position where he has to survive. So he starts to resent his woman. He's living in a cave. He has to cover himself. And so the minute the ice melts, his only desire is to step outside and go and look for food, look for things that are going to keep him warm, look for things that are going to make his food taste better. And so by default, if you even look at the psychology, his only interest is to go and exploit. And African people have done nothing that they haven't done for the entire existence. All we are doing is building our families, building our cultures, innovating. And so these people, their main job, these Europeans, these white people, unfortunately, their main job is to come and try and take and learn from us. So this is not new information. This is in existence. It's the psychology of the European or the Eurasian.
Now we have something interesting going on in Africa because we now have China, who's a big player now. Would you say China's coming to Africa to exploit?
I mean, I think I've heard somebody on your show. I think brother Amin Ra said some stuff.
Yeah, Amin Ra.
I completely agree with. I mean, look, exploitation comes in different forms. I think at the end of the day, everybody has their own best interest at heart. Now, we have been dealing with a particular type of foreign body for about 200 to 300 years, right? When you talk about our post-enslavement and during the enslavement period. And those people have given us nothing. With all due respect, they've given us absolutely nothing. Now, China, in their own way, are only thinking about themselves. And let's not, let China off the hook too much. China has been guilty during the Maoist times anyway, have been guilty of massacring whole Black populations in their own country. So, we're not talking about people who like Black people. Let's just be clear about that. What we're dealing with, the people who want, it's a fresher face, slightly fresher face, because I say slightly because if you go back, I think, to the period of the ancient Kushites, I mean, you had periods where there was trade going on between Africa and China from long ago. So this isn't, again, the trading of two great pieces of land is not a new thing. But I think when we talk about certainly the modern day idea of capitalist trading, China is a new player without question. I mean, I think they've been the largest investor in Africa for the past 60 or 70 years. But we also have to take into consideration the people that we've been dealing with for the longest time. These people have never been our friends. They've never really, I mean, even when you look at there's a really good film called, I forget the name of the film, with Richard Burton, where it's all about how these people, in order to try and steal mineral wealth, in order to try and entice these presidents to do what they want, they would basically start coups. They'll create all sorts of destabilization in the country in order for them to get these deals. And they have 100-year contracts on, say, an oil mine or a gold mine, or timber or copper extracts. What they create is destabilization in countries for their own best interest. Now, what we're seeing with China is not quite that. What we're seeing are people who will send in their operatives. They will learn the concept to a certain degree, and then they will ensure that they establish their business for the purpose of going back and making money and investing in their own nation. I mean, it's still a version of a socialist country. Let me also say to you, what China does well, which Africans need to take into consideration as well, is, when, we came here as students, 15, 20 years ago, and when we came here as students, there were Chinese students coming at the same time. And every single one of them, their visa, they would make sure they have their visa for 2 to 3 year periods. Obviously, the student visa will expire, but that they're going to leave at the end of those 2 to 3 year periods. Why? Because their government has sponsored them to come to Europe, learn everything they need to learn, and take it back to their country. Now, if we as Africans practice the same sort of thing, and I'm not talking about Africa as a whole, but individual nations can sponsor their own people, go there, learn what you need to learn, and bring it back so we can better ourselves, I think we'll be in a better position. But also, I think there's this new agreement with I think 50 out of 54 nations have signed this new agreement for intra-African trade. Let's see if that actually happens. But, that's another positive thing. So maybe we might start seeing these people get pushed out a little bit.
So let me ask you this. So let's switch, I guess, countries or continents or whatnot, or countries. Mm-hmm. Now, Chinese left China, went all over the planet, learned technology, went back to China and developed it and built it.
Yeah.
Nigerians are scattered pretty much everywhere like Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Is Nigeria benefiting from the Nigeria diaspora the same way that China benefited from the Chinese diaspora?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's not, restricted to Nigeria. Kenya has a massive IT hub at the moment. It's the tech capital of Africa.
Right.
But this is really African-born innovation. These are not people who have been sent outside necessarily to learn anything and develop. Nigeria, interestingly enough, is a nation where, as we spoke about a few days yesterday, I don't remember when it was, as a nation has benefited from its diaspora sending money back into the country.
Right.
One thing with Africans is the major benefit from Africans in the diaspora is the remittance that goes back into their countries. I think Nigeria alone last year was 70 billion. There is no foreign aid that is up to 70 billion. There is no deal with China, no deal with America that is worth 70 billion annually. But that is what the diaspora has sent back. And it's the same thing all across West Africa. The people in France, all the Africans that live in France, they send money back on a monthly basis. They're sponsoring weddings, they're sponsoring this and that. The money is going right back into the economy. What they are not doing with that money is building infrastructure, right? They're spending money the money is going back into the economy through a roundabout way to pay for a dress, to pay for school fees, but nothing that's really benefiting the people. If Nigeria wants to obviously fix up and look sharp, to quote Dizzy Rascal, if they really want to try and make things better, then what they need to make sure that they do is that those people that are going out, they're incentivizing them to come back. A good example is Nigerians at the moment, wealthy Nigerians, instead of going to Europe and Dubai and places like that for medical treatment, they go to, and why did they go to India? Because India made it a point to incentivize all their doctors that live in England, in America, and Canada to come back. They built whole towns and communities with houses and the luxuries that these people are using.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
And incentivize them. That's why I think I was trying to make the point yesterday that there are two types of Nigerians that go to India. There's the traders, but there's also the people that go for medical treatment. India is massive for medical treatment for Africans, Nigerians in particular. So they incentivize their people to come back. If we can just do that with one field, maybe it's doctors, we'll transform our medical and pharmaceutical industry forever. You know, simply because those minds coming back will inspire a new generation, you know. And, you know, just to do with education as well. Another thing that we in Africa unfortunately suffer from is we don't really teach our students to think critically. You know, in our schools, it's all about what they call cramming. So you read a text, memorize the text, go and regurgitate that text on your exam. These people are not really being taught to think critically. You know, like you get a university or secondary education abroad where people are challenging their lecturers and professors. In Nigeria, it's cram what you need to cram, write it down, pass. So we're not even being allowed to think. So unfortunately, somebody goes to pursue a degree in law, for example, and they're not really learning how to think. And this is why, in part, we have very poor leaders. We have very poor practitioners of the culture. And even on a lower level, the people who are innovators, you'll tend to find out that these are people who have never been to school. You know, and we need to push those vocational courses on them so that they can, you know, send them abroad and allow them to cultivate those skills that they have and then bring it back and better the country. But I mean, we're talking about people who are not really willing to think on that level. I'm a layman. I'm just telling you my opinion. If these people had those same opinions, things would be different, but they're just not interested.
Now, somebody and this is a little off topic. Somebody in the chat room says Africans do not believe in Africa. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts on that statement?
First of all, I don't like generalizing the whole continent, but there is some point to what he's saying. It's not necessarily they don't believe in Africa. There's a false sense of pride for individual nations. It's a false sense of pride in the sense that
false sense of pride. Absolutely. Go ahead.
It's a false sense of pride in the sense that they don't even understand that these countries are only a few decades old. That it's not normal to have a country where your president is older than the country. In the case of Nigeria, I mean, our president's over 80.
That's the case for the majority of African nations. In fact, that's the case for all of them.
Many of them. I mean, there's some reform. I think Mugabe massively changed it for Zimbabwe. I mean, Zimbabwe is nearly 40, and he was God knows how old. But the point is, we have nations which are younger than our leaders. We have life expectancies where our nations are older than our people. I mean, our nations are younger than our people, you know, the people how long people are actually living. So we have a problem here because we are unfortunately trying very hard to ensure that we are moving forward, but we don't have the progressive leadership to allow us to move forward. It seems to be a very backward sense of thinking. Now, just to deal with the comment that the person made directly, we as African people collectively seem to think that these fake geographical borders are the equivalent of, say, the borders that exist in parts of Europe or the United States of America. We seem to hold on to these flags as though this is us. You know, a Nigerian person will say, "Oh my God, I love Nigeria." You ask them why. You say, "Oh, you know, I love my people." Okay, which people in particular are you talking about? And then they'll talk about a particular thing that happens. Usually, unfortunately, it will be a corrupt thing. You know, the way we make, or even something that's not supposed to be praised. Oh, we have no electricity, but we find a way. That's, you know, these are the kind of things that we glorify. There is no one thing as a Nigerian culture or a Beninese culture or a Ghanaian culture, because the people are still looking at each other as separate. But it's only when it comes to, say, a football match or, you know, somebody is insulting their country that we start to see this, you know, cultural unity. All of a sudden, we're unified. But when you go into the nooks and crannies, there are divisions. And that's no different to United States of America. That's no different to many other parts of the world. But the problem is we never even created these countries on our own terms in the first place. Right. The leaders chosen at independence were not really our leaders. The constitutions even that were given to us at the beginning were not really created by us. Our judiciary, our education, it's not really by us. We've not created a culture in those countries to be able to say that we are prideful. So there is a little bit of a pessimistic view towards Africa as a whole, because we're not looking across the border and saying, oh, that's my brother. We may speak the same language, but that's my brother. We may not speak the same language, but that's my brother. We tend to look at the differences rather than the things that we have in common. And I think, this is what the Pan-African Congress of, I think 1900 was all about. It was about bringing all the Black peoples of the world together. So it's ironic, even when the African Union repeatedly denies a country like Haiti entrance into the African Union, but a racist country like Morocco applies, a country which has been enslaving our people, still enslaving our people till today. I think over 200,000 slaves in 200,000 Africans who are enslaved in Morocco, another 100,000 in Algeria. They're allowing these people to go in and out of the African Union as they want. So we as African people are still looking at everybody else and not each other. So I don't know if I've directly answered the person's question.
You did. There's an echo. Hold on. Are you watching the replay?
No, I'm not watching anything. I'm just watching you directly.
Okay. All right, we're good. Okay, we're good. Admiral, I'm not replying. Admiral's a fool. Admiral's a funny cat. So someone in the chat room, not the chat room, but left a comment the other day that made. In fact, I wrote it down. Yeah. And this is kind of indicative of many just, since we're speaking about Africa, many, not all, I don't want to blanket everybody, a lot of African immigrants in general, not all, I'm not going to say a lot. Yeah. And he made the comment, only a stupid man will come to another country prideful when his country is on fire. Should African immigrants be more humble? Not all of them, some are humble. And I don't want to just call out Nigerians because I get trolled. I mean,
I don't think that person lives in Europe at all, which is the bulk of the African. I mean, the largest African population in any one city in the world is Paris. You will not go to Paris with arrogant-looking African people. Everybody is very humble because this is England, for example, England and London and Paris in particular, two of the most popular locations for African immigrants. There is an incredible amount of humility here. Why? Because the Europeans will quickly remind you that you're an immigrant. And this is a point I wanted to touch on, because you see, when we come, first of all, Dynast, you've never had to experience the degrading process of applying for a visa to come to Europe. It's the most degrading, humiliating process.
Okay, do this. Tell me what was required to apply for a visa to Europe, and then I'll tell you what was required to apply for a visa to go to Nigeria.
And this is, I think I understand where you're going with this, but let me just say to you that I think we very often try to replicate what has been done to us, to our fellow people. And this is part of the same psychological issue that we have. There's no question, the sort of things that even me, my children, because I tried to apply for a Nigerian passport for them recently. I mean, the amount of things that are required, even though their father is a Nigerian with a Nigerian passport. I mean, it's part of the bureaucracy and part of the Oreo cookie type of mentality that we tend to have towards our own people. But just to answer your question, you see, the process is not, what is actually required is not illogical. You know, you need to make sure you have a letter of invitation from, say, if you're going to university, you need to have a letter of an invitation if you're going to visit. You need to show you have funds in your account and so on. That part is pretty straightforward, but it's the process that you experience at the embassies when you're going to apply for these visas. You know, you have people talking to you in a very condescending manner, as if you're not able to articulate yourself. They seem surprised when you're able to speak. And then when you actually arrive in the country, the way they look at you, the way they silence you, I mean, you have to do x-rays if you're a foreigner to come to school in this country. They'll literally take you, strip you, and do an x-ray. You know, these are some of the things, at least I experienced that when I first moved as a student about 16, 17 years ago. Yeah, to strip all of us, Chinese too, but you know, and this is some of the issues that we experience. But then when you're actually here, the level of restriction that you have, you know, if you're a student, you can't work more than 20 hours. You know, as though they're and they even dehumanize immigrants. In England, where I live, for example, they have a program called UK Border Force, which is dedicated to just showing how Indians and Nigerians play around with the system, try and overstay, and they never really take into consideration why these people want to overstay. Are these people overstaying to commit crimes? No, they're trying to better their lives. They're still putting back money into the economy by paying taxes. Now, on the flip side, when a European wants to go to Africa, you know, they can virtually go visa-free to an extent. Let me give you an example. I went to Benin.
It depends on the passport, but go ahead.
I'm just hear me out. I went to Benin last year. I have an ECOWAS passport, which means everywhere in the West African region I can pass through. I
need that passport.
I'm being a Nigerian, and because of the corruption that people experience when they go to Nigeria, I was stopped for over 30 minutes. My country is directly next to Benin. This Canadian girl arrived with no visa. Now, Canadians, if you look at the requirements, have to get a visa in their home country before arriving. Me and this girl were detained, and I'm there arguing my case. They let this girl go. Now I eventually lose my mind.
Was this at the airport or were you on
the border? The border is a different story. Right. I personally, as a Nigerian, find it very difficult to pass the border from Nigeria and Benin. I usually often give somebody 1,000 naira to drive me around, literally, and I'm a Nigerian simply because of the amount of corruption that exists there. But that's another story. But anyway, this girl was allowed to pass, and I wasn't. Now, this is a white female who's allowed to enter my own land ahead of me. And, you know, even the way they determine someone like that, the way they phrase her name, they say she is an expatriate. Whereas when I'm in this country, I'm an immigrant. It doesn't matter if I naturalize and get their passport, I'm always going to be an immigrant in this country. I don't know if you heard about the recent story in the UK called the Windrush Scandal, which is where people.
Yeah. So let me get this right. So Britain asked or requested or reached out to Jamaicans or islanders to come to the UK post, what was it, World War II?
Yeah, I mean, they'd already served in World War II, World War I as well, as part of the British Army and RAF, the Royal Air Force. But also you have to remember that this was still a British colony.
Yeah, so, the Benin, at the Benin border, they thought the white lady was white Jesus. They thought she was white Jesus. That's why they let her in.
Or Virgin Mary or something like that.
Mary, yeah, that's what that was. That's what that was. I'll go ahead.
But as you were saying, we at the in this country, basically they said Jamaica and many of the islands in the Caribbean were still British colonies. So they literally had to rebuild the NHS and all the health service in this country. They had to rebuild the railways and all this. So they told these people who are still British, virtually British colonies, come and work here. Many of them didn't even have passports. They didn't need a passport because they were all part of the same empire. They were all part of Britain. Similar to in the Roman Empire, if you were one of the places conquered by Rome, you're a Roman. Now, these people came here and they've lived here for 60, 70, 80 years. And all of a sudden, a new law is passed. And these people, 80-year-old people, 90-year-old people in some cases, have to prove when they came here. And many of them were deported. There was even a story of an 86-year-old woman. Since 2010, she went on a holiday to Jamaica, was not able to come back until this summer. I mean, this is how they treat Black people. They remind you.
So why continue to go back?
Now, you see, why? Okay. I mean, you have to take a couple of things into consideration. You see, no islander from the Caribbean would rather be here than their home country where there's sun, sea, and all those things. Now, unfortunately, you look at Jamaica as an example. Jamaica has probably one of the most, is probably the country's with the most churches per square mile.
Say churches?
Churches. But it's also got one of the worst, I wouldn't say worst because there are many bad places in the world, but its crime rate.
Crime rate is off the chain. Yeah. There definitely is a correlation between white Jesus establishments and high crime. There's definitely a correlation. It's like that here in Black America. Go ahead.
You hit the nail on the head. This is a common theme in all African, and I say African because I group Black people. I just say Black people are African. Everywhere in the African world, this exists. So they are not just because they're from Jamaica doesn't mean that they are excused from experiencing the same stuff we experience in Africa. It's the same sort of problem. That's why they come back. And many of them, many immigrants, as they would call them, Caribbeans and Africans alike, when they first came here, it was to work and go back. And many of them, because of the shame of not being, calling Britain the mother country, telling all their people back home that, money grows on trees and you can be very successful. Many of those people forfeited going back because they were ashamed. Mm-hmm. There's a thing called no dogs, no Irish, no blacks, which was a very popular thing in the 1950s and 60s, where literally they denied these people houses. And just like Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, these people went and created their whole cultures. And that's where you get the Notting Hill Carnival from, right. So we don't, no matter where we cannot run away from the actual problems that we all experience as Black people.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what we got going on in the chat room. What's this? Admiral Medjay has a man crush on you. He wants to know, how much can you bench press?
I think it's the lens on the camera.
It's the lens on the camera. Okay, yeah, he has a man crush on you, Admiral Medjay. He has a man crush.
Thank you.
How much can you? No homo. He wants to know, how much can you bench press? All right, are you happy, Admiral? Are you happy? Are you happy? And then somebody else said you should be able. He said you should be able to. I'm not going to say that on camera. Basically, you should be able to remove the Nigerian president with your arms. Yeah, these clowns in the chat room today. But everyone, let's get the likes up, please. Let's get the likes up. We have 207 people watching, only 57 likes. Let's get these likes up. So Abuah, what is it going to take, right? Because I mean, Africans are scattered, putting in this hard work, and the countries that they come from, the African countries that they come from, there's nothing to show for it. What is it? I mean, for the most part, maybe some will say, well, like you mentioned, $70 billion gets shipped back home from the Nigerian diaspora back to Nigeria. What's it going to take for the diaspora to go back to their home countries?
I mean, again, the diaspora is going back. The issue is it's a revolving door. As many go back, many will also go the other way if they can. The short-term fix is leadership. The long-term fix is education. And education for me is always the right way, because education allows you to think differently. You have to understand, I'll give you a case in point for Nigeria and definitely the French-speaking parts of West Africa and Central Africa. At the time that the Europeans left, they gave independence to the Africans, and they kept three things in particular, and this is a common theme you'll find with Belgians, Portuguese, and many others. No, except Portuguese, excuse me. Belgians, French, English, is the military, initially controlled by them, the judiciary, and educational sectors.
True.
You see, I spent primary school in Nigeria, and we never learned history. They don't teach history till today.
Okay, let me stop you right there. I'm not buying. Okay, this is what I'm not buying. I think when I hear this, I think that people are full of shit. We don't know racism. We have no clue what racism is. I'm not buying that. When a lot of these African countries were just freed or came out of colonialism in the 60s, not like 40 years ago.
Yeah. So
am I wrong for having that assertion?
I don't understand what you just said. I think I missed you.
No. So, it's this common argument, that you'll hear from a lot of Africans that, we didn't know what racism was until we moved to Europe or we moved to America. I'm not buying that.
My brother, you know what? That's not a far off assertion. I'll give you my own experiences. Again, I spent my time, by the time I was 7 years old, so back 9 years old, I lived in Congo, Burundi, Benin, and Nigeria. And obviously the more formative years were in Nigeria. And my brother, when I say to you, Cosby Show will come up on a Saturday, Bill Cosby just reminded me of my father and every other father that I saw. And because the Cosby Show, as an example, is in an interior location, you don't really see that many white people. So you just see their life and you're like, this is Africa. A lot of us didn't really experience racism on that level because you have a nation where you're all black. We don't know the extent of racism because racism seeps deeper than seeing a foreign person call you nigger. There's more to it than that. There's also the way your own people treat you. I didn't know that at the time. But when I moved to Europe at the age of 9, I was all of a sudden one of 3 African kids in an all-white school.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be white so I could fit in as a 9-year-old, right? Now, this isn't just me. There are many people that can share the same story with you because it's a feeling where a child wants to feel a sense of belonging. But we as African people, because we don't experience this thing, I mean, with all due respect, what you guys experience, I think the African American is the reason why the African American man and woman are the most influential people on the planet. And that's because of what they've been exposed to. They have no choice but to succeed on an extraordinary level, in spite of everything that's going on around them. They have no choice. We look to you guys as examples. We all grew up listening to rap music. In fact, somebody made a comment, I don't know where it was, in one of the comments yesterday that African people hate Black Americans. That is the most idiotic statement, not based on any sort of fact. We look up to these people as though they are God. We look up to African American men, in particular, rappers and all that type of stuff, as though they are gods. Now, unfortunately, we seem to we believe they're gods in certain fields, in entertainment, music, and that sort of thing. But we still look at the European as the supreme god. So as far as us seeing each other and not seeing racism, yes, we don't see racism in the sense that you guys see it. Mm-hmm. We are aware of what you guys experience in terms of racism. We definitely don't experience that. But let me just I'll segue a little bit because there's something I have to point out just African leadership. You see, with everything that's been going on to our brothers and sisters recently, not for the last 200 years, the African Union has never once put out a statement condemning the actions of America. Never once.
Right.
But if something happens to a French racist writer who says something bad and is killed for it, all the European nations will go to Paris and walk through the streets and say, "Je suis Charlie." They'll say all sorts of stupid stuff like that in solidarity with their white brothers. But our brothers and sisters are being murdered on a daily basis, wholesale in the United States. And our African Union has never put out a statement. This is in part to do with this thing that I'm mentioning to you, where we may not see racism day to day the same way you see it, but we experience a much more overshadowing racism, a much more closet racism that we can't even articulate because we're not even thinking on that level. And this is why education is important, because if you get rid of the social studies we're learning in school and teach us history, accurate history, people start to think of themselves differently.
But I find that hard to believe because many of these African countries came out of colonialism, gained freedom.
I don't blame you, but remember, these are very young populations. I mean, the majority of Africa is under 30, majority of the whole continent. I mean, with the exception of a few pockets here and there, but big countries like Nigeria and Kenya and Congo, all these type of places, you're talking about, I think 70% under 30. That's a very young population. This is a population who, imagine if their parents haven't been taught properly, what sort of information are they going to give them about racism? Not that much. I mean, our parents, I was asking my mother-in-law, who came to England in the 1970s, I said, "Excuse me, what sort of racism did you experience?" And when she tries to articulate to me, I'm like, "Why didn't you say this how come your daughter doesn't know this? Why is this information not being spread?" My father told me that in the 1960s, when he was in London, he was dating a white girl, bless him, we've all been there, but he was dating a white girl and he was chased down the street and nearly killed. I'm like, none of this was told to us.
That sounds about right. Sounds about right.
This is part of our African culture where parents don't really share information as accurately as possible because of the pride and the stigma of being feeling as degraded as a human being. We don't like to share that type of stuff, So, I'm not surprised that these people, many people don't think that racism exists in that way. They're being ignorant, especially when they're fed Kardashians every day and they're seeing them with black men all the time, they're going to look at things very differently.
Right. Guys, we have 245 people watching, only 91 likes. Please hit that like button. Shout out to East Afro Dude, my Eritrean brother. He says, great show. Reason why we should go back. Seems like the governments don't want progression. All government power are held at the federal level. Municipal and provincial don't have power to provide services. Now, I noticed in Nigeria, like the money that's supposed to use for infrastructure, a lot of these politicians will take that money and go buy them a $1 billion naira mansion.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of times they're not even held accountable for it.
Oh, it's not a lot of times. The majority of the time, I mean, they're never accounted. To be honest with you, they're never. I mean, since the Goodluck Jonathan administration, which is just before Buhari, we have seen Nigeria regress into a state of chaos. It's the most corrupt it's ever been. You know, there was a military dictatorship throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, part of the 90s. And, you know, it was extremely corrupt in the hands of a few. But we're talking about this now federation where you have different layers of power. You have the Senate, you have the state House of Representatives, you have ministers, you have governors. I mean, the local governments, it's all, people are stealing money on an unprecedented level. I mean, there's no accountability whatsoever. They've got this thing called the EFCC, which was started by a president called Obasanjo. And he did it really as to deflect people away from him. And the sort of people that were being arrested at the time were pretty prominent people. But they'll be arrested and then the fine will be like, so imagine you steal $6 million and the fine is like, you know, 500,000. You know, it's or not even 500,000. It's like 100,000. They would fine them and then they'd pardon them. You know, and it's not until the British governments got involved, which was very reluctant. And when we talk about corruption, my brother, it's very important we talk about Europe. You see, all these indexes will have us African people as the most corrupt places in the world. They never talk about Switzerland. They never talk about the United States, which has the most corrupt.
We're going to Switzerland because Switzerland's supposed to be like the model.
Yeah, I mean, well, Switzerland has this thing called banks, where people are able to put as much money in those banks as they want, which benefits the economy. This is why Switzerland is not in the European Union. They can afford to be outside of the European Union, right? And you go there and buy a watch, you die. I mean, you have 60% of chocolate being, 60% of the world's cocoa being made in Ivory Coast and Ghana. But Switzerland is known for the chocolate.
Right, Swiss chocolate.
Right? But you see, we as African people, if I want to go send money to my mother or my father, for example, maximum I can ever send at one particular time is $10,000 US.
Right.
But look at the reverse. When the politician sends money to, in fact, just in general, when you want to send money to Europe, without any sort of major hoopla, just communicating with your bank, you can send an unprecedented amount. And this is why the Swiss banks, till today, have money from a president who was dead 20 years ago. Abacha, the government has been saying they've been trying to get this money out. Billions and billions of US dollars. So Switzerland really is probably the most corrupt country in the world, the most corrupt nation without question. And I think the USA is very close behind it because of Wall Street, where people are literally trading on guessing, trading money that they don't necessarily have for people that they don't necessarily know. This is if you look at corruption in its true sense, what does it actually mean? Those are two of the most corrupt nations in the world.
Right.
Now, they facilitate the corruption, and places like the World Bank and the IMF are facilitators of that corruption because they'll give a Nigerian politician or some other politician some money, say he's going to do a survey to find out how many students are out of work, blah, blah, blah. And that money is pocketed. And the World Bank, who's supposed to be the unified body to ensure money is being dealt with properly, don't even prosecute that person. You know, It's the same with the ICC. Same thing with the ICC, this International Criminal Court that's supposed to try all the corrupt leaders in the world.
Leaders of color.
But when Tony Blair goes and decides to lie about something, goes to war illegally and all these things, he's not tried. He's not even called a war criminal. I mean, just recently, they tried to indict, they said something about the US government, and the US government said they will, any ICC judge that shows up in America to try and prosecute anybody will be dealt with. I mean, this is a bully. This is a bully. we're not talking about a people who are fair. You see, every sort of thing that Europeans in general, UN, whatever body they may call themselves, whatever, every sort of humane thing that they've put out to the world that we should all do this, this is the standard, they have been the first to renege on it. They have been the first. Whether it's this so-called gay marriage, all these stupid things that they talk about, these things about, oh, racism shouldn't be there, all these things that they hype about, that they say that these things, we shouldn't do these things, they're the first to push back on it. You know, right. They're always the first. So it's just really a ploy to ensure that the working class are still working for them. But they're moving away from it soon. They'll soon find a way to do away with some of us.
Did you hear about the situation in Brazil with the vice president of Equatorial Guinea?
No, I didn't. What happened?
Dude, he got caught with like $16 million and some other stuff in Brazil. Like, you're a vice president of a country. What are you doing with $16 million?
But how does a vice president of a country get in a position like that? You know, where $16 million is even being talked about while he's in a foreign country. It's just, I mean, they're definitely in cahoots. He just got caught by someone who wanted to expose him. It's just as simple as that. These people know what they're doing. I mean, there was this thing in South Africa where this pastor had loaned his private jet to a presidential official. And they had given him, I don't remember the exact amount, but it's something like $15 million or something like that to go to South Africa and buy arms and come back. I mean, this is a member of the church had given his jet. That's even stupid in itself, thinking about it. Wow. To a member of the political, to a member of the party in power, and also the president's colleagues, to go and illegally buy guns and bring them back on a private jet. I mean, this is, you know, these people, they just choose to expose what they expose. This stuff happens daily. I mean, you know, this isn't news. This isn't news. I mean, I'm not surprised at all by that.
Let's see here. African Americans should move to southern east states and vote to leave the union. It's supposed to be called Republic of New Africa, but that's not going to happen. No. And then the VP, who was caught with $16 million, his father is the actual president of Equatorial Guinea.
Well, Equatorial Guinea is an example of how, you know, them and Gabon, two of the wealthiest countries in Africa, in terms of their landmass and what they have to produce. Wealthiest countries, but they have dictators. I mean, you have in Gabon, for example, Ali Bongo Odinga, that's the president. He's been president for about 20 years. His father was president since independence. So you have a dynasty in those countries. Same thing with Equatorial Guinea, Angola. I mean,
well, I think Angola, Santos, he's out. And then, you know, his daughter was pretty much.
It's the same sort of thing. I mean, you look, I mean, Angola, how the Portuguese nations, we probably need to do another episode on the Portuguese-speaking African nations, because what
real quick, let's spend like 8 minutes on it. What are your thoughts on the Portuguese? Now, is Mozambique right, and Angola?
Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde.
Okay.
I mean, those countries, I mean, they had probably some of the most prominent leaders at the forefront of their independence struggle, because Portugal didn't want to let it go. They really didn't want to let it go. And the way they ruled the colonies, even though the other places were very racist, I mean, these people took it on a slavery plantation level, where people did have their African names to an extent and were made to feel like slaves. So these people, rightfully so, like Zimbabwe, decided to fight. And they fought, and they had some of the great leaders, Amilcar Cabral, Eduardo Mondlane, Agostinho Neto. These are people who fought, you know, for decades in the bush until they were liberated. But and they came up with all sorts of innovations while they were in the bush. You know, Amilcar Cabral wrote some great speeches, Weapons of Theory. I mean, great speeches which people need to read. All African Americans need to read speeches like that. And when they finally come into power, obviously they murder people like Cabral, Eduardo Mondlane before they come into power. But what happens quickly afterwards is that these people, instead of bringing the culture that they had created whilst fighting in the bush, the innovations in medicine, education, and all these things, they go and settle into the city life. Okay, now I have a palace now. I don't need to be. They didn't follow the Fidel Castro form of revolution, where, well, Castro family's been corrupt lately, but we don't. The idea is they at least brought in the same socialism, healthcare, and education reforms that they said they were always going to do. But in the Portuguese-speaking places, they refused to do that, and we've seen drastic changes since, drastic changes. And now Portugal, as we said yesterday, Portuguese people are migrating back to these countries and settling in. And before you know it, you have a very multicultural Mozambique, just like the southern parts of Africa and to an extent parts of the eastern part of Africa, these settler places.
All right, we have 265 people watching, 126 likes. Let's get these likes up. Let me take a look in the chat room and see what we got here. Let's see. You're trying to regain a dying or extinct culture is going backwards, not forwards. Repetition of enforcing old culture is instituting enactment of old ways that wasn't progressing. They were conquered. What are your thoughts on that comment?
I didn't really understand what he said, to be honest.
Okay, let me ask you this. People were asking in the chat room, how did African governments function, okay, before colonialism or before white people came to Africa?
Well, before colonialism, those countries didn't exist in the manner that they did. Right. So that's the first thing. So you can't even have that conversation. They function in a very affluent manner. I mean, you take the Benin Kingdom and I use Nigeria a lot because of its size and the variation of kingdoms that exist in there. And also it's where I'm from, so I know a little bit. You take the Benin Kingdom, for example, with their 16-kilometer walls, 4 times the size of China's Great Walls. I mean, these are places that were hard to penetrate. And so what happened was, in the same way they have this thing called Pax Romana, the Roman peace, where they wipe out your entire civilization. The British and the French, when they managed to conquer these places, they leveled them. So you don't even see any evidence of these places anymore. So when we even talk about the Benin Kingdom, we're talking about puppet leaders that are put there. That's what was done in Dahomey in Benin. That's what was done with the Ashanti kings. That's what was done with the Mwamis of Rwanda and the Tutsis and all that. I mean, this is the same thing. They put puppet leaders just to make the people feel as though there's some conversation happening between their people and their leaders. But the reality is these people, the culture had been decimated. The nations that existed in Africa pre-colonialism do not exist anymore. You only have to look at the names of African countries, with the exception of maybe, let me think, with the exception of maybe Zimbabwe, which is named after the great Zimbabwe kingdom. Everything is really named by, Mali is supposed to be, but it's really a misnomer, the Soninke Empire, and a few others. But really, everything was renamed. Nigeria, as we know, was named by the girlfriend of Lord Lugard, who was overseeing the nation of Nigeria. And he just put northern parts. Now,
was it named after the Niger River, or was it named Niger area?
The Niger River, the Niger area, Nigeria. But even why they call it the Niger River, people don't even know why it's called Niger. Niger is from a Latin word which is the same root word as nigger, so it's black. Same thing with Sudan. Sudan is called Bilala Sudan, so the Arabs named it Land of Black People, people. Ethiopia, which is even if you look in your Bible, they refer to Ethiopia as a land of black people, burnt-faced people. So Africa is really just given a bunch of joke names to an extent in order for these people to be able to have names for their artificial boundaries. So nothing existed the way it is now before the Europeans arrived. We're talking about not a very long time ago. I mean, I'm talking about my great-grandfather's lifetime.
All right, bro. Let's see what else we got here in the Burkina Faso, land of the upright standing men.
That's renamed. That's renamed by Thomas Sankara from Upper Volta. I mean, that's not even. That's just a phrase in their language. Yeah. I mean, we could. There are a few more. I can't think off the top of my head just now, though.
As far as the Africans who come to a foreign land and are so proud and boisterous about how they were able to. Emmanuel, that's what's up, brother. I'm glad you got it. Who were so proud and boisterous and flamboyant in regards to how they're succeeding in the West, but not in their home countries. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the people that they're being boastful to are people in their home countries. You see, okay. You can't get away with being boastful in a country like England or France or Belgium. You won't be boastful. First of all, there's the glass ceiling that you will never be able to go past in these countries. This is without question. There's a timidity in Europe where you're not allowed to say certain things, in part down to the fact that they have this love-hate relationship with their royals, where they're, about the French Revolution, about Oliver Cromwell. These are times when the people decided to rebel. Because remember, Europe operated a form of enslavement on their own people, what they called the Normans and the Saxons, or the peasants and the lords. I mean, they had the thing, you've seen the movie Braveheart, right?
Yeah.
The law of first night, where, if a peasant got married, the lord or whoever, the duke, had the opportunity to sleep with the man's wife on the first night. I mean, this is a level of enslavement, a level of enslavement on their own people. So they're always very fearful. And this is why America succeeded so well, because the poor working class of America, instead of siding with the black people as they did in earlier parts to an extent, they were told, you are better than these people. And that, you tell a poor person that you're better than somebody else who's poor, they take that to the bank,
there was actually, hold on, let me try to find it, man. It was a rebellion where poor whites and African slaves.
New York, I think around New York, yeah.
I forgot the name of the actual rebellion, but then the higher ups, they like you said, they pretty much instilled into poor whites that you'll always be better than the rich black man and never to party with them.
That's why
I'm trying to think, somebody in the chat room help me out what the name of the rebellion was.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll look it up.
Somebody help me out. Somebody help me out. Hold on. Somebody help me out, man. Somebody in the chat room help me out. The name of the rebellion. Shout out to Akatude Bowden for the super chat. Yes, brother Abuah will be on more. Please bring him on regularly. He is a very intelligent guy. We need a diaspora state. And then also shout out to hold on, I just had the brother. It wasn't the Haitian revolution. You do an awesome job. Thanks so much. Thank you for
17th century time.
Bacon's,
when you had the original.
That's it. I think it's Bacon's Rebellion. Let me look it up. Make sure.
Oh, that wasn't even the one I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's Bacon's Rebellion. Hold on. No, I don't think that's not it. I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it. Hold on. Yeah, that's not it. It's not Bacon's Rebellion. It's something else. Hold on. In fact, it might have been Bacon's Rebellion. Hold on. No, that's not. It's not Bacon's Rebellion.
So the New York Slave Revolt.
No, it's not the New York Slave Revolt. It's somebody in the chat room help me out. It's like poor blacks and black slaves partnered up, and they were like, "No, we can never have to have this happen again." I cannot think of the name of the actual rebellion, but it wasn't Bacon's Rebellion. It's not Bacon's Rebellion. Peace. Shout out to Eve Bo. Shout out to everybody. All right, so what do we do moving forward? I know this is an open-ended. It's not that either. I know this is an open-ended question. Like,
the most important question, and I think we're answering it right now by doing this show. You see, we have to get to a point where we are educating ourselves. You see, I have 3 children who I ensure, at least I hope to ensure that they don't fall into the same trappings that I experienced. In other words, this church life, this believing that Africans are less than themselves, they are being educated in a different way to the way I was educated. You have children, it's the same thing. We cannot expect to see changes, drastic changes in our lifetime. You can't. I think what has happened, because so many of our brothers and sisters, even I hear people talking about being woke, these statements that people throw out there. Being woke means what exactly? Does that mean that you know a little bit about African history, but you will still go and spend your money with white people, still go and perpetrate the same stupidity that they have to perpetrate? Or does that mean you will go and build with your brethren? You see, being woke has to, this Black Panther kind of mentality, you know, where you will go and applaud, and no disrespect.
Boxers rebelling. That's it. Boxers rebelling. You got hold on.
Boxers rebellion. Boxers rebellion. Correct. Yes. Yes. But this mentality that we have at the moment can only be changed through education and teaching people about our history, because there's a sense of pride. You see, in Europe, every day, in England, for example, every day without fail, every year without fail, on the 11th of November, they shut everything down to remember the people that died in World War I and World War II, without question. All over Europe, you see old monuments of different wars, different kings, and so on. In their schools, they ensure that they take you to places like the House of Anne Frank, if you're a Jewish person, to ensure that you learn certain things. But with us Africans, what do they show us? And unfortunately, the only historical events, historical things they like to show us are things like Elmina Castle, or, you know, if we ever see anything, or this slave museum. And this is what they are showing us. We can't really blame them. That's what they have to show us in order to keep us in the position that we're in. But once we get to a position where, in this chat room, for example, where people are watching, there's somebody there who no doubt is going to change the world in the future, who's watching, maybe doesn't know it yet, but they are going to do something that will impact a whole bunch of people, and that will in turn spiral different events. And that is why it's very important that even this conversation is being had, but it must translate into something serious. You see, in 5 years' time, if this is just what we are doing, we have failed. We need to ensure that we can take this into something tangible. What are you going to do? And I know your role in this, you in particular, Search for Uhuru.
Yes, sir.
The platform that you have is so important for waking up a certain demographic of our people. My role is to wake up another certain demographic of our people. And eventually, as time goes by, those people will then awake different types of people. And before you know it, we get to a point where we have a generation who are in power, who are able to lead countries, lead nations, but with the right mind. But we also have to start lobbying, in some cases, to create our own schools, where we start taking away poor people in Africa, poor people in the Caribbean, and creating a school there with our own curriculum. Because those are the ones who are being neglected by the governments. In the United States, same thing. Creating our own schools where these people have the freedom, a liberation school, just like Abibi Fahode in Ghana, a liberation school, where people are being led. These are the people that eventually lead the countries of Africa, the countries of the Caribbean. And then we can start to come together. So those are starting points for me. I know there are other ways in business you can do this and that, but short term, like I said, is leadership. Long term is education.
Absolutely. Guys, and it's not Boxers Rebellion. That was a rebellion that took place in China. So we're gonna figure this out one day. We're gonna definitely figure it out. But brother, thank you so much for joining us. Share all your information with everybody so they can reach out to you, and I'll also put your information.
My YouTube channel is Onuora Abuah, Onuora Abuah, Abuah. I also have another one called AEA Films. AEA Films UK is the YouTube channel. It has all my films and my documentaries, trailers, and things like that over there. www.aeafilms.com. You can also check out that one. And if you need to find me personally, you could get me on Abibi Tumikasa, all black social media website, 16,000 members. My name there is Onuora, ONUORA_ABUAH. So please get in touch, and I appreciate some of the encouragement that I've been receiving. Thank you.
All right, cool, brother. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We got to do this at least once or twice a week, man, if you're free.
My pleasure. Thank you. No problem.
But everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you go to Search for Uhuru on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. Also go to searchforuhuru.com, dynasmir.com. Go to amazon.com, search your name, Dynasmir. Please buy a book. Until next time, family, which will be tomorrow, Dynasmir, Search for Uhuru. Peace.
Okay.